This is the Aston Martin Heritage Podcast with Wayne Scott and Garry Taylor.
On this episode, the full story behind the V12 Vantage, and we hear from a younger listener to the Aston Martin Heritage Podcast.
Discover more about the story of Aston Martin. amht.org.uk.
Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the Aston Martin Heritage Podcast. I'm Wayne Scott and it's been a while since we've heard from him. Here's Garry Taylor. Hiya, Garry.
Hello, Wayne. How you doing?
Very well, thanks. It feels like forever since we were sat together doing the Aston Martin Heritage Podcast, but a lot has been going on, I understand, and you've been busy out getting some amazing interviews for us. So give us a preview of what we've got to come on forthcoming episodes of the podcast.
Yes, it's certainly been a very busy period during March and April. I've been getting some really great content together, and this is coming up in episodes 6, 7 and so on. One thing that is of particular interest is that myself and Steve Waddingham from Aston Martin Lagonda, we went around some of the old factory sites, and we went to Feltham and we talked about the David Brown site that was there, which is now a car park, but we got some interesting content there. Then we went to Hanworth House, and this is most beautiful, ancient house, which is sadly in a state of ruins, but there's a great story there with Aston Martin. And also, just to follow up on that, we went to well, where did we go? We went to Sainsbury's at Staines, Wayne. I think you may be, and you're going to ask me, Garry, why did you go to Sainsbury's at Staines?
Garry, why did you go to Sainsbury's at Staines?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that. And the reason I went there is because that was the site of the Lagonda factory.
Amazing.
And I'm not going to give anything away. We saw the manager there and he brought something down relating to Lagonda. So we had a conversation regarding that. So there's some great pieces there from the original factories. The other thing that's going to be coming up sometime soon in future podcasts is the Bulldog story. Now, I was delighted to go to CMC. Went up there and we saw the Bulldog. Now, sadly, it was in bits, but it was because it was being worked on. And spoke to the people who are helping restore it, bring it back to life. And it's got grand aims coming up for it to do a 200 mile an hour run, which absolutely will be something, won't it, Wayne? So we spoke to the people there, how they've managed to bring it back to life, how they've enhanced some of the engineering to improve the car. And we hope to get an interview with one of the major players behind the Bulldog, and that will become a special feature. What will be a special feature is that I'm delighted that we have had an exclusive interview, Wayne, you'd be pleased to know.
All very exciting, this.
This is all very exciting. Stand by, drum roll. I don't know if you can mix in a drum roll, Wayne, but let's pretend there is one. Andy Palmer. Andy Palmer has given the Aston Martin Heritage Podcast an exclusive interview about his time at Aston Martin. He was only there 5.5 years or so, can you believe, Wayne? But he packed a lot into that period. So we had a conversation with him. Very grateful for his time. Interested insights, his views on the cars and other matters. And that will be coming up in a future episode.
That's really exciting stuff, because he was a man who transformed Aston Martin and brought some of the models that really did push it into a new era to fruition. So he doesn't talk in the media an awful lot these days, but we, as you say, have an exclusive with Andy Palmer, so I cannot wait to hear that. That's going to be brilliant, and I'm really pleased to hear you enjoyed your time at CMC in Bridgnorth there with Bulldog, and it is an amazing facility they've got there. They do all sorts of classic car restoration.
And all sorts of cars there. You could spend ages looking around. Amazing cars.
It's got to the stage now with these restorations where, and CMC is a perfect example of this, where basically they're like Formula One facilities in that they are spotlessly clean. Did you notice that?
Yes, it puts my garage to shame, I must say. But they are, aren't they? These premises are, they are. Well, I think what's the default term? It's like McLaren, just absolutely pristine. It is amazing.
Yeah, so we look forward to that. And of course, don't forget, you can get in touch with us here on the Aston Martin Heritage Podcast very easily via astonmartinheritagepodcast.com. That's the website that holds this podcast that you're listening to. If you've joined us through Apple, Google or Spotify, or of course you can subscribe to get brand new episodes just as soon as we've completed putting them together for you. And all you have to do is subscribe for free on either of those platforms, anything you like really, depending on the device that you're using, and you can join us every single time on the Aston Martin Heritage Podcast. If you go to that website though, there is a contact button. You can fill in a form and let us know about your stories around Aston Martin. We'd love to hear from you, in particular if you used to work for Aston Martin, or if you have particular memories of your life or childhood or family that was involved in the marque in any way. Get in touch with us, AstonMartinHeritagePodcast.com. This podcast is all about collecting the stories from Aston Martin's history. That's not just big bosses that sit at the top of factories. That's also you that experience Aston Martin as well. Do get in touch, and lots of great stuff to come. Meanwhile, lots of interesting changes at Aston Martin. As we talk to you here in May 2022, Aston Martin has some new bosses because Tobias Moers stepped down after less than 2 years in the CEO position, Gary.
Yeah, he did. It's interesting. There was speculation regarding his position early in the year. I think it was back in January, and Autocar magazine sort of scooped or suggested that his position was in doubt, and Aston Martin themselves slammed that down and said, I don't know where you got that story from. But here we are in May, and he's been there for less than 2 years, and now we have some new people appointed. So Aston Martin in probably in 2 years have now had 3 CEOs, which is I don't know, it's unusual, but I just hope there's some stability now. But that's where we are. Cars like this, these passionate cars need a passionate figurehead, and I hope we'll get that now through Amido Felisa as the CEO. Tobias' roles has been split in half, so we've got Amido as the CEO and Roberto Fedeli as the Chief Technical Officer. Talking of passion, well, they're both from Ferrari. You know, if you talk about passions, I think Ferrari has passion in its spades, doesn't it, right?
Absolutely, yeah, and of course they will understand the brand loyalty and the following that Aston Martin demands as well. So hopefully that will work out for the company, because we always want to see Aston Martin doing well, of course. And there have been other movements, of course. The DBX 707, which we have discussed at length on this podcast as, well, really the saviour of the finances at Aston Martin in recent times. Everyone has to build an SUV, it seems, these days. That's what everyone wants to buy. Aston Martin have joined the ranks of luxury SUVs, and the DBX 707, which we announced the unveiling of here on the Aston Martin Heritage Podcast, has had its first customer car built. Of course, at St Athan, where the factory is, and it's going to be heading across over 50 countries globally, this vehicle. And the Secretary of State for Wales saw the car off the production line earlier this month. So it's all systems go for the DBX 707, and you get a bit of Welsh pride coming through with this vehicle as well, don't you? Because, of course, it has brought all sorts of joyous positivity to that area of Wales.
Yes, and I think I've read somewhere that they're taking on staff again in Wales, which must be good news, because I think it was 2 or 3 years ago that they were releasing staff. So I think the DBX clearly has been a big success. They're taking over 50, or I think it's 54%, the last figure I quoted, of the sales. So, you know, that's where the market is. And I've heard someone say to me that it's the SUVs, these sports SUVs, is effectively going to be the sports car of the future. So, you know, I'm not sure if that's going to be the case, but, you know, the cars are being a great success. It's working for Aston Martin, so I think we just have to applaud it. And, you know, they're not going to just rest on their laurels. So we've got the DBX, we've got the DBX 707, and there's often been some rumours that there will be a long wheelbase version, or perhaps a coupe version. These are just suggestions, nothing official, just rumours. But I think we can see the DBX brand being extended, because it has been a very favourable addition to the marque.
Absolutely. And of course, it marks the first of the product development phases brought about by Lawrence Stroll, who is their executive chairman. Of course, it was he started this project. It's the first one that's happened under his control. So sort of a new era being beckoned in a way. But mentioning, of course, of Lawrence Stroll brings me neatly onto Formula One, and the season's underway. I don't think anyone's going to be jumping up and down for Aston Martin taking the Constructors' Championship this year, but they're nice looking cars, aren't they? They're beautiful out on track, and of course we've seen the Aston Martins in the support vehicle roles as well, with the pace cars and everything else.
Yeah, indeed. I remember you asking me when we did the New Year special, when we did look back, and towards the end of the podcast, you said, Gary, what's going to happen for the year ahead? And I said, well, Wayne, I think you will find that Aston Martin Formula One, they will have some great success this year, and they will be on the podium. Okay, we're in May, early days, but I think my prediction is beginning to crumble. But I understand. I've seen in Autosport and other places that they have brought for the Spanish Grand Prix, which is coming up. They've brought up some major improvements for the car, and it's going to be driven by Lance Stroll. Surprisingly, Sebastian's not going to be driving a version of that car. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that will prove some great results for the year ahead, and then I can feel quite smug at the end of the year.
Well, I'm not making excuses for Aston Martin in Formula One, but let's just put this into context. It is only their second season. They are a relatively small car company to fund a Formula One exercise, let's be honest, and these rules that have changed the face of how Formula One cars are built for this season have caught lots of people out, none least, of course, Mercedes, who seem to be having a torrid season so far. So it happens to the best of them.
You're right. I think the rule changes were going to identify who got it right and who got it not so much wrong, but who got it better. And I think Ferrari, I think they came out at the pit doors running, didn't they? I think they cracked it very. It's this porpoising that's causing the problem. They've managed to nail that fairly early on. So I think when we get to about mid-season, I think the other teams will not so much get their act together. We'll find a solution, and I think we'll find it much more close racing. So yeah, you're right. I think these rule changes have changed the game tremendously, and of course it makes it far more exciting. Rather than I like Mercedes, I like Lewis Hamilton. I like to see these things win, but it's good to see some other people up front, isn't it?
Besides Formula One, Aston Martin's success in motorsport continues in sports car racing. And of course, there are 3 teams running Aston Martins this year in the World Endurance Championship: TF Sport, Northwest AMR and Destachon Racing. And at Spa, there was Aston Martins on the podium, in particular Ben Keating, Henrik Shaves and, of course, the works driver Marco Sorensen. They were amongst the quickest GT cars out at Spa. There's Paul Dalla David Pittard and Nicky Tim in the Northwest AMR car as well. And they're all doing really well. Sebring winners, podium positions at Spa, so lots of success still happening within sports car racing for Aston Martin, albeit not perhaps with a works team, but certainly a works supported privateer, if that makes any sense. But Aston Martin, that's kind of their natural home, isn't it, really? We've seen them come to provenance over that for the last 20 years, really, since the very early 009, 008 and 007
I remember
cars.
that. I remember going to Silverstone to watch that.
We're going to get misty-eyed if we're not careful.
Of course, it's Le Mans next month as well, isn't it?
It is indeed, yes. I'm not going this year, unfortunately. I've got a gig at Silverstone doing commentary, unfortunately, so I won't be there, but I'm saving myself up for next year because, ladies and gentlemen, if you are anywhere a Le Mans fan, don't miss next year. Just drop everything and go, because next year is the centenary, 100 years of the 24-hour race.
I'll see you on the ferry, because I'm definitely going this year. I did have plans for this year, but other things are sort of conflicting, and I think Le Mans had to be parked to one side. But 100% next year. I'll see you on the ferry, Wayne.
Can't wait for it. It's going to be fantastic, and it's going to be a great opportunity to celebrate some of the amazing British cars that have made huge waves at Le Mans over the years, not least, of course, in the late 1950s with Aston Martin. So we'll do more on that on the podcast in future episodes as we lead up to that 100th anniversary of the 24 Hours of Le Mans. But we've got a nice view on who is listening to our podcast, and I think it's fair to say, Garry, that mainly they are Aston Martin fans who are old enough and ugly enough to own one. But occasionally we do get some young listeners contacting us, and we did hear from one young listener called Spencer Fish. I understand your better half Jane Nichols went off to meet him.
Trust Talk. We take you behind the scenes at the Aston Martin Heritage Trust.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you first became interested in cars and, of course, particularly in Aston Martin?
Well, ever since a young age, I've really enjoyed Aston Martins, and it's been my favourite brand of car for a long time now, as long as I can think, basically. I remember my first ever experience in Aston Martin was in your old DB7, which was it? DB6. God. And it was a really good experience, although I did really enjoy the ice cream, to be fair. Well, I went to Silverstone with you and Garry, and that was, I think, I really enjoyed that experience. It was one of the best experiences I've ever had, not just with cars, but probably ever. I got to go around in a new V12 Vantage, and I mean very new V12 Vantage, black. It was very nice. And I remember very kind man Jeff, he is very nice in letting me sit next to him for the whole time going around Silverstone.
Was a parade lap, was it, on an Amok event?
Yeah. And I remember I was wearing my full Aston Martin driving suit kind of thing, tracksuit. And I remember you and Garry were in the Signet. It was, very, very nice. And I remember that whole day, that was probably the best experience, because I think I remember then going to the Owners Club after that and getting a few bits and bobs.
Your grandfather has taken you out to various places, to Goodwood, hasn't he?
I remember at Goodwood, I think that's probably where one of my first memories of really getting into Aston Martin. I remember there seeing very old Aston Martin, and I just fell in love with it at first sight, basically. It was a very beautiful car. It was beautifully made, had a beautiful paint job, and that kind of sparked my love for Aston Martin.
I know that you're particularly interested in the history of Aston Martins. You like the fact that you have a book and you've read all about the beginnings and the David Brown era and how the cars have developed. Tell me a bit about that and how that has influenced your love of Aston Martin.
I actually prefer the older cars to the newer ones, because I find them more historic, and I find it really shows the pureness and what Aston Martin's all about. It's about racing, it's about sports cars, it's about beautiful road cars that full English, and are probably the most English cars I can think of, really.
And also, I think you've told me once about the Le Mans victories that you enjoyed.
So there was obviously the 1950s, 60s era where Aston Martin had Le Mans victory, and also quite recently actually with the Le Mans victories in the amateur and the classic pros. I can remember they were all in their V12 Vantage GTs, I think it's a good trademark for, or a good way to show, really, Aston Martin. It's got an F1 team, it's racing in Le Mans.
Is there any way that this love of yours, which is becoming a passion, has influenced what you'd like to do in the future?
Definitely has. Ever since probably I was 5 or 6 kind of thing, I really enjoyed engineering and that kind of mechanic role, and mixing that with my love of Aston Martin, my career that I really want to pursue is to be an Aston Martin mechanic, and to get that role would be my dream come true.
You're listening to the Aston Martin Heritage Podcast. Discover more about the story of Aston Martin, the cars, the people, the history with the Aston Martin Heritage Trust. You're always welcome to visit us at our museum in Oxfordshire, so find out more via amht.org.uk.
Well, Gary, they say from big dreams by small people come amazing geniuses, and perhaps Spencer is the genius that is waiting to be a future Aston Martin engineer. You just never know, do you? It's great to hear his enthusiasm.
Oh, he is, and he's a bright lad, and annoyingly, he is very good at everything he does, and which I find very frustrating, because when I was 12 years old, I was rubbish at everything. Spencer, thank you very much for that, and keep listening.
Fantastic. Don't forget, you can keep listening as well via AstonMartinHeritagePodcast.com. You can also subscribe, just as Spencer did, by clicking on the Listen on Apple, Listen on Google, or Listen on Spotify podcast button to subscribe to receive each episode of this podcast for free, automatically, as soon as they're ready for you. And we've spoken a lot about motorsport on episode 5 already. A little bit more motorsport for you now, because we couldn't do this episode without having a little tribute to Tony Brooks, who passed away at the age of 90 on the 3rd of May 2022. They referred to him, Gary, didn't they, as the racing dentist, because of his professional life before motorsport.
I'm not really aware of any other driver that would have been, has always been constantly referred to their part-time profession. I can't think of one, but Tony was always referred to as the racing dentist, and it seemed to have stuck. I guess he was fine with that. He was a fairly quiet and a publicity shy man, so being known as a racing dentist, why not? And his on-track performances, they just spoke for him. They just spoke themselves. I mean, he was very, very good. 6
Grand Prix victories across 39 races between 1956 and 1961 led Sterling Moss to refer to him as the greatest little-known driver of all time. But of course, we're talking about him because, of course, he raced for Aston Martin as well, and he won the 1,000 kilometre at the Nürburgring in 1957 and the 1958 RAC Tourist Trophy as well with Sterling Moss, didn't he?
He did in the Aston Martin DBR1. He was less successful at Le Mans in 57 because there was an accident in that year's 24-hour race, and it brought about a change in his racing philosophy. He was a devout Catholic, and he vowed that he would never race again if his life was at risk with a car that wasn't, shall we say, in sound condition, which always seems to be at odds, Wayne, to how Sterling, he loved the risk, he loved the danger, whereas Tony sort of said, I'm not quite really prepared to go that far. As long as the car is sound and I'm happy with it, I will race, but I'm not going to do unnecessary risks. So it was so he did very much, I would say, held himself back, but he was a storming driver, a fantastic driver, and to get an acknowledgement from Sterling Moss to say the greatest little-known driver of all time, I think that's a compliment, is something in itself.
Well, it was a great shock to the motorsport community when in 1961, before his 30th birthday, he announced that he was going to retire from motorsport and go back to running the garage back at home. But he was a family man, wasn't he? And he always wanted to make sure that there was enough of him left for the family. And I think he'd seen so many tragic consequences of motorsport on families through that era. Of course, it was an era where you were lucky to come back from a race, quite frankly. Tony Brooks, just before his 30th birthday, packed it in, and he was the last surviving Grand Prix winner from the 1950s, wasn't he? Because, of course, we lost Sterling in 2020, and that was the last one of them.
That's very true. It's quite an amazing statistics. It's rather sad, and I believe, I think someone will shoot me down in flames. I'm sure he appeared at one of the Aston Martin Heritage Trust lectures, and I think he was there talking about his career and promoting his book. And I'm just going to lean away, just play some soft music while I try and find it. And yes, I found it. It's called Poetry in Motion. A lovely book. I'm sure it's still available on your favourite online retailer. And he talked about his career, and he's a thoroughly engaging, quiet person, and be sorely missed. We're losing the greats, aren't we?
We are indeed. Tony Brooks, then, who died 3rd of May 2022 at the age of 90. We like to tell stories here on the Aston Martin Heritage Podcast. This is what it's all about, sharing the stories and the tales from the history of one of the most revered motoring brands in the world. And on to our next story now, the story of the V12 Vantage. And you, Gary, went to catch up with two blokes who know all about this particular Aston Martin model, didn't you?
Yes, I did. It's very topical. I think we spoke about in an earlier podcast about the V12 Vantage. Its latest version was launched, or announced, I should say, back in, I think it was December or something like that. And then it went quiet. You thought, well, what's happened to the car? Anyway, this week, in May, in about the third week of May or so, the car has been shown. The customers have seen it. It's been out for driving impressions, so it is very topical. And we wanted to cover the story of the V12 Vantage because, Wayne, the V12 Vantage, the big engine in the relatively small car, has a very special tempo in Aston Martin history. It was one of those unique cars that will always have a great following. So what we did, spoke to Steve Waddingham from Aston Martin Lagonda and Guy Jenner from HWM Aston Martin at Walton-on-Thames, and they discussed, we talked about and followed the Aston Martin V12 Vantage story right from the very beginning, from its original concept that was announced at the design studio opening.
Immerse yourself in the rich heritage of Aston Martin. The cars, the people, the history. The Aston Martin Heritage Podcast.
Steve, the design studio opening in 2007 was a fantastic event because it was the only Aston Martin design studio that was ever created, because they always subcontracted it out. But also at that time, we had an announcement of a fantastic new car, didn't we?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so prior to 2007, we hadn't had a styling studio ever, really. I mean, probably the last time anything was ever designed in-house would have been in the 1950s, and they wouldn't have had a studio as such. So yeah, big moment in Aston history. And in order to have something to really show on the night, the car that was ready to show project-wise was the car that we call the RS Concept, which showcased the idea of a V12 engine in the Vantage body shell.
And was it just a concept? Was there an inkling that we could put this in production?
I think at that point it really was a kind of working concept, and it was a kind of dipping a toe in the water to see if there would be any interest around the world in that type of car. And obviously very quickly, even on the night, there were people saying, I want one of those, and it just rippled out from there, really.
Guy, you experienced that ripple, I understand.
I did, yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it was a really exciting product for Aston Martin, and the design, the styling was just right, and they launched it in this colour called Mako Blue. And Mako Blue was this light, sort of glittery blue that just showed the contours and the muscles of the Vantage body so well, and it looked aggressive because it sat 15mm lower. It had big air vents, 4 big air vents in the bonnet. That was the subtle but very muscular message that the car sent, that there was something serious under the bonnet. And it had new wheels. It looked really, really spot on. So yeah, I mean, we had this launch evening at Gaydon, and Betts, as chief exec, then his statement when he announced the car was, "This is the ultimate performance interpretation of the Vantage range, combining our most agile model with our most powerful engine. It represents the definitive driving package, providing spectacular performance to ensure dynamic, thrilling and everyday usable driving." And actually that's a pretty good summary of the car. So I think off the back of the great feedback they got on the evening there, the car was pushed for production, and so it went to Geneva the following year. So the launch party was December 2007.
2007, so it means March 2008, Geneva.
You got it, yeah. And the car ended up on the stand there, and that's where I can remember being at the dealership.
Was it the same RS concept?
Same RS concept, yeah. And I can remember being at the dealership and getting calls from members of the team on the Aston Martin stand saying, "Guy, we've got a customer here who just wants to buy this car. Can you take a deposit?" And so, I got multiple phone calls across the week where people were just getting so excited about what they saw and couldn't resist.
What do you think, Steve and Guy? What do you think? What was the appeal behind this? I mean, the V8 version was no slouch. There was the V12 DB9 at the time.
Yes,
that wasn't too shabby either.
Yeah.
Was it just this? I suppose we all like the idea of a big engine in a relatively small car. Do you think it just pulled at those strings?
So like a hot rod, really. The Aston Martin hot rod, if you look at it, it's the smallest car, the biggest engine.
Yes.
And it just delivered it with such a big punch, and people just didn't make cars like that in 2008. They don't even make cars like that now, really, generally speaking. So there was a fantastic piece that Jeremy Clarkson did on Top Gear when he first drove the production version.
Yeah.
And if you haven't seen it, go onto YouTube and find it. And it's got this lovely music playing, sort of classical music, and he's wafting along in this, spectacular sort of hill range, saying they're not going to make cars like this any longer. This is the end of an era. Now, as it turned out, he was a fair few years too early with that one, because obviously the era continues and with the new car that's coming. But I suppose, generally speaking, he wasn't far off, because we all know that we're heading towards a point with car transportation where things could potentially get less exciting in terms of noise and the thrill of a big throbbing engine under the bonnet. So in a funny kind of way, he did kind of hit the nail on the head a little bit with that car. But it was just a beautiful bit of Top Gear, the complete opposite to the usual Top Gear stuff that
it was
normally see.
Just it was a cinematic moment. It was just silence, other than the car and this beautiful music, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
It was a lovely moment.
I think one of the other critical aspects of the car is that manual gearbox. So I think there was two things going on there.
So it started with a manual gearbox, did it?
It started with a manual gearbox. So at this point, its engine and running gear and so on were very closely related to DBS, which was a manual at that point too. And if you looked at the marketplace in general, if you went out to try and buy a manual sports car with a V12 engine, and there really wasn't a great deal out there, if anything. No. So it was a unique offering, and I think that's what really hit home. And the fact that it had the potential to be a bit of an animal. And we like cars that are a bit of an animal.
Did, in your experience, did it attract custom from other marques?
Yes, it did, and it probably changed the demographics slightly to DBS, because DBS was what might be considered a super GT manual. The thing about the V12 Vantage manual was that it was more focused, so it had a shorter wheelbase, which made it more nimble and a bit twitchier, but we can come back to that. It had fixed rate dampers, so it was kind of firm, so you had to want that driving experience. And so we certainly saw people come from different brands. We also had the odd customer that bought V12 manual and decided to return it and think about something a little bit more restrained.
Yeah, I remember a few people like that, Vanquish owners in particular, previous Vanquish owners, and they go, I'll have the new V12, definitely, thinking it was going to be like a Vanquish, which was a GT really, and then find themselves silly in it and bring it back and change into something something else, basically, you know.
Yeah.
The other thing I remember as well, thinking about it, is I remember meeting a lot of people that when you said, what do you normally drive, the answer was, well, actually, I'm into bikes. I've got super bikes,
Yes.
got Ducatis and big, you know, monster kind of road bikes, and they were looking for something less likely to kill themselves in or on,
Yeah.
you know, and a sports car that actually turned them on because they were used to that kind of thrill of riding a big, powerful bike. So I remember a lot of serious bikers buying V12s, and quite often having both, of course, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember that. And the other thing I remember are people that used to buy them and then do a road trip with them. There's a real road trip car, you know, where you drive to Geneva rather than go on EasyJet, you know.
Yeah.
And every journey would be an adventure, you know, like you would if you could throw your gear onto a motorbike and tour, you know. So yeah, I remember that being a very different client base to all the other cars that we were selling at the time, you know.
I think you're spot on. Interestingly, notable owners that I can think of, Adrian Newey had one.
Guy Martin
is the famous TT rider. Guy Martin famously bought his V12 before he bought a house. I mean, that man had his priorities right, didn't
didn't he live in like a barn with a hammock and a V12?
What more do you need, Steve?
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
that's fine.
absolutely.
Run after my own heart.
And you make it sound like a bad thing.
Yeah. I can think of a few similar stories to that actually. Maybe not as extreme as a hammock in a barn, but yeah, it's definitely people that put everything into the car because they really wanted one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was that kind
very
of car.
different. Real like a cult car from the word go, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. And I think starting with the original RS concept, well, I mean, Aston did not hold back. So it was even more hardcore than the final production car. So it had been, to set the tone, it had been stripped out, so it didn't have ABS, it had no aircon, no infotainment system. So it weighed 1,600 kilos. The final production car weighed 1,680. So it was 80 kilos lighter, but you suffered for those 80 kilos that were stripped out of that original car. It had a DBRS 9 engine in it, didn't it, that put out 580 brake horsepower.
Yeah,
That's true. Yes.
So it was a real statement of intent.
So they had to soften it for production, didn't they?
Yeah, I think, you know,
Relatively.
yeah,
exactly
Air
right.
conditioning, for instance, you definitely want that in a car with a big V12 engine, getting very warm at the front, you know. So yeah, but it was even the softened version is still hardcore.
Very
isn't
much
it?
so. Yeah, very much so. So I think the interesting things about V12, first of all, so driving experience. The first thing that I really liked about a V12 the first time I drove it was actually not how it went, but how it stopped. So it had these amazing carbon ceramic brakes that were also on the DBS, but this time the V12 Vantage, they were stopping at a lighter car. And it was one of the fastest decelerating cars you could possibly buy.
Yeah.
And to go fast, you need to be able to stop, and it gives you that confidence. And
A bit like how the
I
DB4 GT was back in its day. Really, that was a car at the time that had, I think it set a record for going 0 to 100 and 0. You know.
Yes, that was it. That was
so it's always been
headline figure was champion, wasn't it?
something that Aston always tried to get right over the years with brakes. But yeah, you're right. It was really noticeable, wasn't it, in the V12?
It was, yeah. I think, in fact, I've got a quote from Steve Cropley. He said, Steve Cropley of Autocar, I should mention, but he's extremely well known and an incredibly experienced journalist. He said, the brakes are phenomenal. They simply eliminate speed like nothing I've ever experienced, squeezing the car into the road and making you hang forward on the straps. And that was it. I mean, that was so true.
Yeah. I must admit, it's a car that I remember driving for the first time and literally getting out with a massive grin. In fact, laugh out loud, I think, was invented for that car, because it was just like, wow, this is crazy what this car can do.
I remember my experience in a V12 Vantage. Aston Martin rang me up and said, would I like to have one for the Silverstone Classic?
Did you have to think about that for a long time?
Well, you know, I looked at my diary and I said, okay. And I was driving a Jaguar XJR V8 supercharged at the time.
Still a quick car.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah.
So I drove up to Gaydon, and it didn't have a sport button, but it did have a sport button,
Yeah.
So you're wafting up there listening to Frank Sinatra, and you press the sport button, and it will politely cough and say, "Oh, you sure, sir?" And it will just move on a bit faster.
Yeah.
Anyway, I left the car at Gaydon. They just threw me the key to the V12 Vantage. Got it for the weekend. See you Monday. And I started it up, and my goodness, I mean, it was a totally different experience to the XJR. And I just got on the M40 going to Silverstone, and I was gently accelerating, and I noticed the sport button. And I thought, what does that do? Is it like the Jaguars?
Yeah.
Anyway, as I had to explain to the judge soon after, I mean, seriously, it just lifted up. And I think, Guy, wasn't it a matter of you had, was it about 90% of the action in 25% of the throttle movement? It just
tightened. Leapt forward, didn't it? I remember doing the same thing.
Leapt forward.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like someone just pushed you in the back.
Yes. And just by pressing the button,
Just
and
pressing
hardly
the button, yeah.
gentlest movement on the throttle. Phenomenal. Phenomenal.
You're exactly right. It shortened the travel of the throttle in effect. So you'd get at half. I think at half throttle you'd get full power.
And it was.
So if you're listening to this and you haven't driven one yet, when you drive one, don't press that button until you're ready. Make sure it's a straight bit of road.
Yes,
and you're ready for it, because it will make you smile.
Yes.
Don't press the red button.
Yeah.
So
that's amazing.
They do have a name for being a bit spiky, which is worth talking about. They're not uncontrollable. It's just the cars were delivered on Pirelli P0 Corsas, which were dry bias tyre. So as soon as there was a bit of moisture in the air, then
a fog,
yeah, just something on the horizon.
Exactly.
The car would certainly be a bit more mobile and keener to rotate. Which sounds like a bad thing. It didn't make them undrivable, but if you wanted to drive them hard in adverse weather conditions, you definitely needed to bring your A game. But I think the other thing that's changed over the years is tyre tech has changed. So now if you were concerned about a car like that being a bit spiky, you could probably put it on some newer tyres that would change that aspect of the car.
Tyre technology in that short space of time?
Definitely.
You think?
Yeah, for sure. So you can definitely change that characteristic. But actually, there are plenty of people who find it fun. So and it's got wonderful steering. You kind of know what's happening. But cars that have got shorter wheelbases become more and more difficult to catch in a slide. So that's the downside to agility, I suppose. But it does make it fun.
And one thing I would say, another practical tip for anybody listening, if you're a V12 owner or a DBS owner, if you've got one of the more hairy V12 cars and you've had it for a while, if you suddenly start thinking that things are getting a bit more scary, the grip front, maybe if something's happened on a journey and you think, that's weird, I've never done that before, have a good look at your tyres. Don't look at the tread, but work out how old the tyres are. Find out how old they are. Because over a period of years, the rubber compound starts to change, and then the grip goes down. So you can have miles of tread left on them, but if they're old and you've got a low mileage car, the question when those tyres were, because
these tyres
you'd be amazed. I've known people that have nearly sold their car, but then been advised to change the tyres, and they're falling back in love with the car because suddenly it grips differently, and it's not scary anymore. So if you have scared yourself in a V12 car recently, check your tyres. Don't look at the tread, check the age of them, check with your dealer if you need to. They've got date stamps on them.
I think that's a good point.
And it's really worth putting a new set of boots on if you're in that category.
Yes.
So there goes a little tip from the Wadders.
That's a good show.
What was tip number one? So we've got the car. How long was the first generation in production for?
So it was 2009 until 2013.
Right.
And they made in total just under 1,100 coupes. I think 1,099 coupes in total, which isn't many. I mean, just to put that in perspective, a coveted car from another brand, a Ferrari F40, well, they made 1,300 Ferrari F40, so it gives you an idea of how rare.
Really? Yeah. Now you do tend to think the F40 being very rare.
Yeah, which I guess it is relatively in the overall scheme of things, but a V12 Vantage is rarer still.
Yeah. Another little thing I'll just thinking of as we're talking about rarity, I meet people a lot that are looking for a car and they come along, they say, yeah, what I really like is I like dark exterior colours and light interior colours.
Yeah.
So in their head, they're thinking they're going to buy a midnight blue car with cream truffle interior.
Yeah.
What you don't realise is we may not have made one, or we may have made one,
Yes.
or 2, or 5, or whatever. So if you're looking to buy an Aston, a used one, always keep a very open mind on colour schemes.
Yeah.
Because what you think you want, you may not find one.
Yeah.
And I had a guy I met recently who wanted a dark blue car. I won't say what model it is. It was a dark blue car with a dark blue interior.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the ultimate colour combination on this particular model. And he found the car, he bought it, and when I looked at it, it was the only one ever made.
Wow.
So he'd waited 18 months, and by sheer luck, he must have found the car, the only one. So again, if you're listening, you're looking to buy a car, keep as open a mind as you possibly can on colour schemes, because otherwise you could be in for a long wait for a car that may or may not exist, or may be in the wrong country, or not for sale.
Yeah, great advice.
So there we go. I'm sure you've probably come across the same sort of thing.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think it's just an adjustment. But you're right. I would always seek to buy the right car rather than the right colour.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the primary driver.
Service history, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Interesting, Gary. You asked me why did people want a V12? I thought there was a really good summary. This is what would get me with a V12. This is from Evo magazine. When they tested the car, I was going to quote it. They said, why it has 6 forward gears is anyone's guess. 4 would suffice. With 420 foot-pounds dragging such a dainty aluminium structure, it can pull away in third and obliterate hot hatches from 1,000 RPM in fourth. Sign me up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Says it.
Great summary though, isn't
Absolutely.
it? What a V12 engine's all about.
Yeah. 6 gears, but you don't really need all of them.
No.
Yeah. Fabulous.
Excellent. So 2013 is where.
Oh, before we jump into that, I mean, did it affect DB9 sales?
So I don't think it felt like it affected DB9 sales. Price-wise, it was £135,000 when it was first launched, V12 Vantage. So it was probably 35k more than a typical V8 Vantage.
Right.
So quite a step up in price, I guess, in percentage terms. And DB9 was just a very different car. So to my mind, the car that was closest to it really was DBS manual.
Yes.
But I think if you were drawn to DBS manual, and it's such a beautiful car, I just think that's the car that you'd buy. So it felt like quite a unique offering and had its own niche within the range.
Right.
Yeah.
So, sorry, you were about to say next generation.
Well, I was going to mention there was a Roadster variant.
Yes, indeed.
So they announced a Roadster variant. They made 101 versions of the Roadster. That was in 2012, and it was a slightly different spec. It had a few more bits, so it had some carbon fibre side strakes and mirror caps. It had glass switches, the option of a reverse parking camera. This was cutting edge for Aston Martin at that point. So
it's funny, isn't it? You sort of forget about the camera. It was like, wow, a camera.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very James Bond.
Different wheels, and it had slightly tweaked damping as well. So but just 101 of those Roadsters were made, and they were £150,000. Actually, they were a really good buy for people.
I think that's almost like the modern version of a short chassis Volante. So the car called a short chassis Volante, it's 37 of them, and they are just the connoisseur's kind of convertible Aston Martin, really, and they sit between DB5 and DB6, but they're rare as hen's teeth. And really, I remember that car being like that one, that you could tell by the people coming in to buy them. A lot of the people who bought those cars had already got other Astons, V12 Astons, including Vanquish or V12 or DBS. And they weren't necessarily buying it instead of, they were buying it to go with.
Yes.
And they were like, absolutely, sign me up, because it's not a lot more money than the coupe. And you're going to make 101 of them, and they're not all going to be in the UK, or they'll be roughly a third, and a third. So you're a seriously rare car from the word go. And they also rode really nicely on the different dampers. I mean, that actually made it slightly more forgiving and made it a really rapid but also comfortable sports touring sort of car, really, wasn't it? So that's one of my top tips. If someone said what car to go out and buy for a future car to hopefully watch it go up in value, I would say definitely one of those as being one of the modern classic Astons that will probably one day become a real collector's piece.
So Steve's choice is a Roadster V12. Mine is a V12 Coupe with carbon Kevlar seats.
Okay.
That's
because you ride road bikes, racing bikes on a razor blade kind of saddle.
Yeah, exactly. I adore discomfort. Yeah, exactly right.
Have you seen the size of me? I think I need a bit more comfort, But yeah, I can imagine that as to get the full, feeling of what the car could do.
Yeah, that's right. So those seats were 17 kilograms lighter, so they save weight, but although they're slightly less forgiving than the standard sports seats, you get more feedback through the chassis, so you feel.
And
just
they weren't
plugged
uncomfortable.
in.
They were actually quite nice to sit on, weren't they?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So that would be my choice. But I completely agree about the Roadster. I think it's a wonderful buy.
Yeah. There's one car in particular that I've sort of followed it over the years. I showed it to the first owner being built, and if you're listening, Ian, hello Ian, I'm sure you recognise this already. It's a lovely car, just a real beautiful spec. And then that car then later on was bought by somebody that I worked with, funny enough, and he had it for a while, and then I think the car sold again recently. But what just a fabulous looking car.
With all those clues, I know the car, and it is.
You know the car, I mean.
Yeah, it is a fantastic looking car.
But and there were some really amazing, lovely, subtle specs. And there were a few outrageous ones, and there were a few cute ones I seem to remember, like white with red carbon fibre bits on it. So there's something for everybody there, really. And also some brightly coloured cars. But fabulous things. And break all that down into single figures for cars in certain colour schemes and hand of drive and, that sort of thing, But what a great car.
So that takes us to 2013, where all of a sudden there was a dramatic change to V12. It became the V12 Vantage S. Mm-hmm. There's lots of changes to the car, but the big one is that it went from being a manual to a sport shift gearbox, a 7-speed sport shift gearbox, and this was driven primarily. There's always been this love of racing within the company, and inevitably a sport shift gearbox, an automated gearbox, is faster on track than a manual. And that was, would you have guessed, Steve, from Aston's point of view, that was the primary driver. It was the fastest way to get around a racetrack, was to have automated.
Absolutely. I mean, people still crave for a manual gear shift, but actually, talk to a racing driver, they won't remember the last time they used a gear lever.
No.
Because racing cars don't have gear levers anymore,
Yes.
And that was a fabulous box. And I've always liked the paddle shift cars, but I kind of was very fortunate to drive the Vanquish from literally job one, the original Vanquish, and that gearbox, if you know what you were doing with it, was really rewarding. But this was so much further on developed than that, and so it was really a fabulous thing. If you could master a paddle shift car, drive a sport shift free gearbox in the V12S, and then try and tell me that you'd want anything else, because it's just brilliant. And I remember a very interesting evening spent in a very early V12S, and I remember thinking, right, you need to slow down, this is getting a bit out of hand now, because it just goaded you into just going further and further into the envelope of what the car could do. So amazing bit of kit.
I think for me the sport shift, it's not an auto, so people who were looking for an automatic gearbox, frankly, they'd find it a bit disappointing. But
I remember this from the previous podcast, an earlier podcast we did, to emphasise that sport shift is still a manual gearbox.
Yeah,
exactly that. Drive it on the paddles, interact with the throttle.
Yeah,
you've got to learn how to drive it, but when you do, as Steve said, it's super rewarding and it's great fun. It's certainly more rewarding than a traditional automatic or dual clutch transmission. So I've got a soft spot for it as well. I think it's one of those gearboxes that did get mixed reactions, because again, I think a few people came to it expecting it to be an auto, and if that's what you expected, you'd probably have been disappointed. But great gearbox.
But look at the D button and think of it as D for don't. Don't press it. Because actually, in order to...
So there's two buttons you mustn't press.
Don't press the drive button, because really and truly, if you are trying to multitask and take a phone call or whatever, and let it drive automatically. You've still got to think what the car's going to do,
Yeah.
and allow it to. You've almost got to lift off when you think it's going to change gear.
Yes.
So you might as well just take control of it yourself, because if you're going to think like that anyway, just tell them you're going to phone them back later.
Yeah.
Or put the phone on silent and just drive it.
Yeah.
Just flip the paddles. And
Get
just,
caught in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's so much nicer to drive. And I've heard real horror stories of people buying V8 and V12 sport shift cars and buying them from a non-Aston dealer, and just being told, just when you're ready, just press the D, take the handbrake off, touch the throttle, and off you go.
Yeah.
And actually people have mistakenly bought them thinking they're an auto.
Yes.
And not, it just really worries me how many people are in that category. And if you're listening and you are in that category, get in touch with us.
Yeah.
And we'll try and give you some tips and advice of how to drive it correctly. And I'm sure, Guy, if anyone's local, pop in and see you, you'll happily show them what to do.
Absolutely.
And it's dead easy once you know how, and so rewarding.
Yes.
As you kind of master it and get it right. And it's such a great car to drive, that gearbox.
Yes. So there's the gearbox. So it is quite a big change with this. So it had more power as well. So it was a 510 brake horsepower engine in the original V12 Vantage manual. What had been used in the range subsequently was a more powerful version of the V12 engine in Vanquish, the new Vanquish. We'll call it Vanquish 2, and that had 565 brake horsepower. So they put the 565 brake horsepower engine into V12 Vantage S, and it made what was a quick car staggeringly quick.
How much more? I can't remember. How much more was that from the original V12?
So 55 brake horsepower more.
55.
And if I remember rightly, we put a different silencer at the back, which took a bit of weight out of the exhaust system.
Borrowed from the 177.
Yeah.
Yeah, which was really cool.
There's an exhaust to borrow and
Yeah.
onto a a fairly what was a standard model in the range, and it gets a £1 million+ car exhaust
Piece of
silencer.
jewellery
Yeah.
exhaust
So
code, yeah.
it just got better and better. It made it even even more of a soundtrack, and it was lighter,
Yes.
which didn't exactly slow it down, did it? So
No.
perfect
And then
storm.
with the 7-speed gearbox, it then enabled them to have a higher top gear. So this was a car. If you look at, I think V12 Vantage and V12 Vantage S are quite subtle in their aesthetics. They're muscular, but they're restrained. But it was a 205 mile an hour car. It was enormously quick. So Roadster was a little slower. It was 201 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Or with the roof down, maximum of 195. Bit restrictive, that, isn't it? You've got to get the roof up.
Yeah,
full experience.
Yeah, I can see the reason in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for those not in a hurry.
For those not in a hurry. Yeah. So S, more power, different gearbox. The other big change was they fitted adaptive damping. So adaptive damping solved that problem of the original V12 being firm or firm. It was never too firm for me, but people did comment that it was a bit firm.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you could have softer damping, or you could firm it up to even firmer than the original V12 when you wanted to drive spiritedly. So Aston have, across the years, have used this phrase again and again, but it's about breadth of ability, that sort of broader set of attributes, which just made the S a more usable prospect.
Yeah. And then, of course, we did what we said we wouldn't do, which was made a Roadster version of it.
Yes.
Which was a little bit controversial to begin with, but I think those that were maybe a little bit aghast then forgave us, and it was another great car. And I can remember driving one back from Millbrook with the roof down, and there's a bit of dual carriageway that goes to Milton Keynes with a sort of fairly high concrete wall in the central reservation.
Yeah.
And blasting along with the noise ricocheting off the concrete, with the roof down. It was just unbelievable, So yeah, I mean, that was another way of enjoying all that combination of the 177 exhaust, more power, sport shift gearbox with the roof down. That's another great car.
Brilliant.
The one for the fantasy garage.
Yeah. And so it did enormously well, and I think globally it did well.
Yeah. I think, again, I'm trying to think what the numbers are now, but it was similar numbers in the end as to what the first car was, maybe a little bit higher figure.
Right.
But yeah, in the great scheme of things, there are not that many of them.
No, you're dead right on them. So there was 1,017 Sport Shift coupes. There were 260 of the manuals, which we'll come to next, and 91 manual roadsters and 272 Sport Shift roadsters.
That's it. Yeah, so more than if you add all that up, that's more than the original car, but still not a massive amount, And I've also a car that went out of production and then straight into collector territory.
Yes.
In a funny kind of way. There's never been a kind of a big drop.
That's a valid point. Because most cars go to not quite that wilderness.
Yes.
They're not
with these.
No, they went straight to collector, didn't they?
Yeah.
What was interesting about the end of it, and we'll talk a bit more about the run out in a moment, but it felt like a moment in time where actually the market and customers in general could see this was the end of an era. Rather than quite often an era ends and you look at it retrospectively and think, oh yeah, it's all over and it's too late. Well, it felt like the market understood, actually, we've got this last opportunity to buy a big naturally aspirated V12 engine. Let's jump on the opportunity. And so there was a spike in demand at the end of V12 Vantage S in its life.
People
which was
actually saying, I want another one.
Yeah.
Because that will last me for if I buy another one.
Yeah.
So there were a few people, weren't there? I can think of quite a few people that went for almost all three variations. First one, an S, and then one of the last cars at the end.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this was creeping into now the Andy Palmer era. So we had Ulrich Betts.
Mm-hmm.
But Andy Palmer joined the company. Would that have been 2016?
2014.
Was it 2014?
2014.
Wow, okay.
That's right, yeah.
So V12 Vantage S was already on the market.
Yeah.
And it had a sport shift gearbox. And Steve, you remember sort of the way the car came to market in terms of the manual option appearing?
Yeah, I mean, basically... another great kind of it's a story we can talk about now because there's enough time involved really, but there was a kind of little inner skunk works at Gaydon with a small team of people that had all done 25 years plus and were kind of working together almost under the radar within engineering in a little hidden kind of porter cabin and a workshop, and we're doing all sorts of weird and wonderful things, including trying out a manual shift on the sport shift gearbox. So it had all been kept very quiet because at the time the mood of the company was to go more down the road of automatics and sport shift cars, and manuals are really falling off the grid a little bit, But then Andy came along, being a transmission engineer, caught wind of the project, saw the car, drove the car, went, that's it, let's get it into production, So. And it's things like that. The British motor industry is full of little stories like that.
Yeah.
Other car makers have done it over the years, and the V12 has been like that all the way from birth. Really, it's a what if kind of car. Like, what would happen if we did that? And then the next thing you know, we build it, we like it, put it into production. Other people like it and they buy them, and so it's been an enthusiast car, not just by the people who own them, but the people who designed and engineered them and built them. Everybody loves the car internally, and that's why I think everyone's excited about the new one, because here we go again,
Yes.
Just when you thought it was all over, it's not. There's another car, similar recipe.
Yeah.
And so it's fabulous, really. But that's kind of how it came about. It was and that's the thing about Aston. We're small enough to be able to do things that are really niche. We are a niche, really, in the industry. We're a tiny player. If you look at the contribution to the 80 million cars a year that are made globally, we make 6,000 or so, so we are a tiny little niche player anyway. But then to be able to do things like this, it's just great, isn't it? And that's what all of us in this room, we all love about the brand, is that you never quite know what's coming next, and it keeps it all exciting.
And I think the buyers of the V12, I think they bought into that enthusiasm, that skunk works. It wasn't here's a commercial car, we can sell it, we can make a profit.
It's not a spreadsheet car.
Yes, I don't think. Good point, Steve. Isn't it?
More a case of the opposite way around. It's like, here's the car, right, we get the calculator out, let's try and work this out backwards. Can we get away with this, and actually how much is it going to be, you know, and it really, and you know, because you've been involved in those sort of meetings at the planning stage of, I'm sure we've been to this dealership over the last 70 odd years and said, got an idea about this car, bit different, what do you think you could sell any? And over the 70 odd years, HWM has sold everything that we've ever come up with, really. And also including coming to us with ideas for things. So
agreed, but I think all of these projects, you hit the nail on the head, it starts from a point of passion and a love of cars rather than a love of spreadsheets, and that's why, you know, people buy into it. It's talking the same language as the people who buy the product.
Exactly.
So that was V12 Vantage S manual, and as we said, it's quite a rare car. So 260 coupes, 91 roadsters towards the end of its life, and then there was the final version of V12 Vantage. Now, the timing on this was just exceptional, and it's rare that this happens, but Aston Martin went to Le Mans, and this was 2017, and they managed to win both the GT classes. And Johnny Adams took his win on the final lap.
Yes, I remember seeing
classic Aston Martin race.
Absolutely.
Final lap, you know,
of a 24-hour race. It was won in the final lap. Absolutely incredible. In a car in the halo colours of the green with the yellow stripe, and the following week Aston Martin launched their final run out of the V8 Vantage platform, and that was V8 AMR and V12 AMR. And of course, the race car had a V8 engine in it, but nevertheless, both V8 and V12 were offered to market in the same halo colours, and it just, you know, as a marketing exercise, it was just amazing. It just kind of all came together beautifully.
It really did, didn't it? And of course, although there were the halo colour schemes, you could have, well, there were various options, weren't there, in terms of different colour schemes or anything you like, you know.
Yes.
And again, I'm sure you've got some stories about Q cars. In fact,
Very
I can think of one right now. Hello, Nick, because I know you're listening. Your car's a bit special, as we know, one-off, and there's one I was involved with, which again was a one-off, and fabulous. I mean, again, some of the best fun I've ever had, helping people come up with an idea and then watching it go through to being produced. You know, and there's some other cars as well. There's 3 cars within the AMR V12 Vantage production. 3 of those cars were built for 3 chaps that all knew each other, all had previous generation Roadster V12, and they sat down with us and said, look, we want to do something a little bit different, and we want this, we want that, and there was lots of like little subtle options that were incorporated in all 3 cars. But each of the 3 cars had its own colour scheme.
Yes, yeah.
And they were known as the 3 AMR Ego. I can't say the word. Amigos.
Oh, right.
AMR. Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the 3 Amigos. Let's call them that for a minute. But the AMR. And they were just fabulous. We had so much fun with those cars, watching them being built, and there was all sorts of stories behind the scenes that went into those cars. And actually what we did right at the end was got the 3 cars back to Gaydon once they'd all been delivered. Back to Gaydon, we emptied out the atrium, and actually all 3 guys drove their cars into the atrium. That's the only time we've ever let a customer drive a car, their own car, into the building. Brilliant. And it was just fabulous, you know. So again, that was a wonderful way of celebrating the end of that whole model line of VH Vantage cars, really.
So I think there really was this mood of this is the last opportunity, and I think that's why people chose to celebrate the end of it by going a bit wild and doing some different bits with their cars, because they recognised there would never be an opportunity to spec a naturally aspirated V12 like that ever again. And the AMR versions did come with a few extra bits, so they made 200 V8s and 100 V12s, and we could have done with 500 V12s, frankly. It was massively oversubscribed, which was great. I think, if anything, it probably took Aston by surprise, because, you know, if you look at the numbers, that there were more V8s being built than V12s, because I think that the anticipation was that would be the waiting. But yeah, no, people desperately wanted the last of the V12s, and it had a 595 brake horsepower upgrade, and that gave it that was done by having magnesium manifolds and critically a full-length titanium exhaust, which was available. So you can put it on any V12 Vantage S as an upgrade. And I can remember we had a factory car here once to give V12 customers an opportunity to try this power upgrade, and every customer that tried it went up the road, and by the time they'd opened the loud pedal, they just, yep, I'll have it, I'll take it, because it was the noise. Yeah. The noise is just incredible with the titanium exhaust. So that added some real experience to the car.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So now we move on to, well, what do we call the new generation Vantages? Does it have a name? Is it Series 2? Is it going to be a generation? Is it called Generation 2? This new Vantage compared to the old one?
Well, it's called V12 Vantage Final Edition.
Well, I guess that's probably in brackets almost, isn't it? Really, I mean, yeah. At the moment, it's V12 Vantage, isn't it?
Yes.
And I don't suppose anyone's had to explain which one it is yet, because we haven't built any.
No.
But once we get them out into the field, you're going to get people on the phone saying, I've got a V12 Vantage, or I want to buy a V12 Vantage.
Yeah.
And the first question you're going to have to ask is, which one?
Yes.
It was a bit like the Vanquish, isn't it?
One. Yeah,
Yeah.
A bit like that, yeah. A bit like a 911 for that matter.
Yes.
You phone Porsche, you want to buy a 911, which one? They've been making them since 1965.
Yes, yeah.
So I dare say we'll come up with somebody will come up with some terminology for it, and that may well be second generation or whatever.
So am I surprised or not surprised? I mean, I'm surprised that the V12 Vantage, the latest version, has come out, because I seem to recall at the time that if they were going to put a V12 in a Vantage, because they were asked this when the V8 was launched, it would totally change the dynamic of the car. We're not going to go down that route.
Yeah.
But we've been here before.
Yes.
There's a little thing. Well, what if? Shall we try this? And
There were some engineers keeping very quiet at the back of the room, but scratching their chin, going.
And marketing are going.
That.
I don't know. Marketing may be going. Look, we had a damn good time with the first generation of V12. So can we try it again? So, Guy, over to you. We've now got the V12 Vantage Final Edition, and Final Edition that is the case now, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I think it will certainly be the last time a V12 engine will go into a Vantage in one way, shape, or form. So, yeah, I think it's the end of the V12 Vantage format that we're entering into as an era now. So, yeah, it's a really critical point. And again, I think that same mood, customers recognise that this kind of car will not be available in the future, and so the initial response has been fantastic. But it's interesting, the mood or the noise around V12 Vantage existing has been rumbling along ever since the Speedster. V12 Speedster came about. And
exactly. I guess if nothing else, the Speedster.
Why did you do the Speedster?
I think because we could.
I think
it was
you could.
Kind of
That's right.
Let's do something that is extreme and again a collector's piece from word go.
It was Le Mans. Did it have a link to it? I can't remember.
No, not really. I mean, Speedster is another car. When you look at it, you think, can't believe we've sold 88 cars without a windscreen. And somebody asked me once when we were selling them, how fast did it go? And I said, well, how strong is your neck? Because you've got to, and you'll need your helmet on, because there is a tiny little bit of perspex as like a sort of bug deflector, and that's your lot, isn't it, really? Yeah. But it's just phenomenal. And again, isn't it great that we can build a car like that, get away with it, and sell it, and off, and they're off to around the world to the owners, and actually compared to some of the other special projects, even the price of the car was relatively modest for a car to be built. It's just a tiny number.
Yeah.
But of course, the first question out of anyone looking at it and knowing what we're like as of old would be like, well, if you can put it in the car without a roof, then could you not put it in a car with a roof? And I'm guessing that one thing led to another, and here we are. So I guess the answer is we can. So we did.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly the feedback we were getting at dealer level.
Yeah.
Customers were having the same conversations. So you can fit the V12 engine in that chassis. Does that mean? and no doubt Aston Martin would have had the same feedback centrally. And well, there's history, isn't there, with this model range, and it's part of what modern era Aston represent. Big engines in small bodies has become an Aston thing.
Sort of proven winning formula, isn't it? Almost?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It made me smile just seeing it written on a piece of paper, thinking, "Oh wow, yeah, that's cool."
There is something
Yes.
very reassuring by
Yeah.
seeing a V12 Vantage. There is something about that, isn't there?
Yes. And interestingly, this car as an offering is different to the previous models. And the way I see it is it sits almost between V12 Vantage and GT12, where it's just a little bit more focused. There's more aero going on, so it's more overt in terms of its sportiness. But what does please me is that it feels like at the factory there is a focus on making the cars faster, more nimble, more agile, but without destroying ride quality. They still want to protect the usability. So although I haven't driven the new V12 Vantage yet, and all the presentations that I've seen, there was definitely a focus on making sure that it was a usable, nice, what I would call a fast road spec chassis setup. And they've got a suspension setup. Well, there's a couple of things they needed to do. Was one, it's got so much torque. I mean, that 5.2 litre V12 twin turbo. It's just a monster of an engine, and so more than anything, the first challenge is trying to manage all that torque going through the rear wheels. So they've actually had to soften off the rear suspension a little bit, and they've got something called tender springs, which kind of take out the initial bumps in terms of ride quality. They just help manage ride quality. I get the feeling this is going to be a focused but usable car, and that really pleased me, because there's this risk that sometimes there can be too much focus on making a car have track pedigree, as it were, and then you end up compromising what a car can do on the road and ruining the car's on-road ability. So this feels really well pitched. It's an auto, but there's two reasons for that. I think one, trying to get a manual gearbox that could cope with the torque of that V12. Well, I hate to think, what a track gearbox might do it. I don't know, but it's just
you're pretty limited, really, aren't you? Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, it's pretty limited. And of course, the 8-speed ZF is just such a good gearbox.
Yeah.
It's brilliant, and so it's strong, it's compact, lightweight, and it makes the car really nice to drive.
It sounds exciting. I mean, how many it's a Final Edition. How many cars can be made?
So they're going to make 333.
And can someone come in today and buy one?
No, instantly sold out. Yeah.
How quick is that? That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. It's great to see, and it shows that there's that appetite.
Yeah, exactly.
Why 333? Where did that come from?
Well, that's an interesting question. So we had a little debate about what number it should be, and we knew it had to be around 300. And we gave ourselves a bit of plus and minus on what the number could range from and to, and somewhere between 300 and 350. But actually, when we were trying to think of a number, we looked at all sorts of things. We looked at historic numbers. If there was a number that had a meaning to something, we went for all sorts of things. And in the end, it was quite simple, really. We did 77 177s. We've done 99 of various things over years, like Zagatos in particular. We did 88 speedsters. Mm-hmm. So let's go 333.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Was that. And we kicked that idea around in a few sort of meetings internally, and and everybody thought, great idea, it's a perfect number, that's it, 333 cars.
I think that's great. I feel that Aston could have sold twice as many quite easily.
Absolutely. I mean, if they've gone already.
But 666 might have been pushing it.
A bit of a tricky number as well.
But no, it's funny, isn't it?
And,
and then you sit, there's a little bit of like, we should have done more. But then if you'd done more, would you have sold them that quickly?
Yeah.
Part of the attraction is because you're not making that many of something, that makes people go, I've got to have one. if they want the car, and it's a no-brainer, isn't
So
it?
what's the price premium for the V12 over the V8?
So it's 265,000 for the V12 plus options. So the average car is somewhere between 300 and 320. So it's quite a significant price premium over a coupe.
Yes.
But it costs a lot of money to develop a car and build only 333. So it's always that sort of sweet spot and balance of you could build more cars and have a lower retail price. But as Steve said, particularly as Aston are. They're an ultra luxury brand, and it's certainly managing supply and leaving the market wanting more is really quite important. So I think this is a very responsible approach where they're making sure they are building less than the market needs. Yeah.
And are you for your clients, for your customers, are you speccing some now? Are you?
Yeah, so that they've all been specced. And
is there a particular flavour that's coming through? Is there a certain spec that people go for?
There isn't a certain spec. There seems to be a really wide range of cars, and so the interesting thing about this vehicle, the way it can be specced, is you could go really bright and really sporty, and it's got this big wing on the back, which is an option. So you can have the full wing, all the colours, stripes, and you can really make it stand out.
Let's talk this rear wing. So there's three of us around this table. So let's have a vote.
Yeah.
I'm going to vote delete. Steve?
Well, if it was mine, I'd probably delete it. But I have to say, of all the rear spoilers I've ever seen on one of our cars, I think this one is the best integrated in terms of, you can tell it's a spoiler, but somehow it kind of works with the shape of the car.
It does.
So if you gave me one, I wouldn't mind which way round it was, but but if I was speccing my butt screen one with tan leather interior or something, I probably wouldn't have the spoiler.
So that's a cop out from Steve. So Guy, what would you?
So it is really tricky. It's for me, it's spec sensitive.
Yeah.
So when you see the bright colours and the more overtly spec'd cars, you look at them, you think, well, it just doesn't look right without the wing. But equally, if you're going for something subtle and under the radar, as Steve said, in Buckinghamshire green or something along those lines, a dark grey, actually having that wide body, because this is 40mm wider than the Vantage, that's already a wide car. So there's something about a wide Aston, purposeful Aston in a dark colour, no wing. Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah. So I think that's good. And Aston have worked really hard on reducing weight. It's not a light car because it's a Vantage with a colossal V12 engine in the front, but they've done all sorts of bits. The theme of exhausts, pinching rare and expensive exhausts, well, they've pinched the expensive exhaust out of the Speedster, so that was a lightweight exhaust that saves, I think, 7.2 kilograms. It's really good. It's got, again, those ceramic brakes, a really nice lightweight carbon seats available, that saves 7 kilograms. I think it's a nicely specified car.
So we're coming to the end of our time on the podcast. Guy, Steve, where do you feel the V12 Vantage in either guise, how will it stand in Aston Martin history? Guy, what do you feel?
So one of my frustrations with V12, because I'm a huge fan of it, is that I think it's been a little overlooked and undervalued in the marketplace.
Do you?
Just because I think, as we said earlier, there's almost nothing out there of that era that offers a manual gearbox with a V12 naturally aspirated engine, and indeed later turbocharged. It's a rare combination in a sports car like this. So I think actually the whole of the model range is going to be lifted up in the future as we sort of realise what special cars they were, and they really are special cars, sat in a wonderful chassis with wonderful steering, wonderful brakes. If you like driving, a V12 Vantage is just a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Steve, you're the company historian.
Excellent collector's car, all of them, even the one we haven't actually built yet.
Yes,
sold out. Absolutely, definitely one of our greatest cars, and we've not even built them yet. You just know it's going to be a great car. It's going to be collectible. Any of them are. Pick your poison, really. Do you want to change gears with a manual gearbox? Go for one of the original cars, or do you want one of the really rare last of the S's with a 7-speed box, or do you want to do paddle shift and, any of them, literally any of them.
Yeah.
And just do your homework, find the car that suits you, keep an open mind when you're shopping, and enjoy it when you get it. You will not be disappointed. Just fabulous cars.
Gentlemen, I really value your time. It's been an amazing story about the V12 Vantage. We could carry on with the V600, the GT12, but at the moment we'll call it a day, and we'll go back to those cars, the GT12 and the V600, another time. Fantastic. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Well, a great story there of the V12 Vantage, and one place, Gary, that won't be short of V12 Vantages, I'm sure, will be the big event this year, the event that you just simply can't miss, the Aston Martin Heritage Festival. Yes, we here at the podcast and the Aston Martin Heritage Trust, just outside Wallingford in Oxfordshire, are bringing you the biggest event in the world. In the world anywhere, for Aston Martin fans. It's happening at Brooklands, and it's on the 14th of August, isn't it? So tell us more. What can we look forward to?
It is. It's going to be the second one, Wayne. We had the first one up in Dallas Burston, I think it was called, last year. That was just after the COVID restrictions were relaxed, and that was such a great success, and we just had to do another one. So this is our second one, 14th of August at the Brooklands Museum. There's a lot to celebrate. All Aston Martins are welcome. Please don't just think it's because it's at Brooklands, it's going to be dealing with old cars. It certainly is not. There are going to be 3 special theme displays. There is going to be pre-war cars, and some of the Aston Martin pre-war cars will be going up the famous hill. I think that would be great fun to see. So there'll be the pre-war cars. We'll be looking at 75 years of David Brown purchasing Aston Martin Lagonda. Can you believe? Aston Martin Lagonda, 75 years ago, Wayne. Incredible.
Amazing. Yeah, and of course he was living at the very place that you mentioned earlier that you're going to be visiting on a future episode at Feltham in Middlesex. That's where he was.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll be covering 75 years of that, and also 50 years of the, well, what should we call it, the classic Aston Martin V8. Trouble is, when you refer to Aston Martin V8, it's been used a few times. So this is the classic Aston Martin V8 that we all know and love from that era. So we're celebrating those. So we've got a pre-war, we've got a David Brown, we've got the V8s. So it's going to be plenty there for all Aston Martin viewers. We're going to have so many trade stands. There's the museums itself is going to be open. There's going to be plenty of parking space. The cars are going to be parked in eras, so it won't just be random parking. As soon as you turn up, you'll be directed to your era. And the whole Brooklands museum site will be available for you to wander around and look at these magnificent cars, and Concorde as well, which is there. Now, I can hear you're tempted. You said, Gary, where can I get the tickets? Well, all you have to do is go to our festival website. So if you want to join us for a great day out, celebrating all things Aston Martin, this is turning out to be an annual festival. I'm sure we will do another one, though I may be shot down by the chairman, we never know. But if you go down to astonmartinheritagefestival.co.uk, you will find how to purchase your tickets. Alternatively, go to amht.org.uk and follow the link from there. So there you go. It's in August. It's not that far away. Tickets are really selling very, very well. We hope to have a record-breaking number of cars. I think at Dallas we had over 650 cars, and I think we're going to be breaking that this year. So the sun will be out. It'll be a lovely day. Come and join us.
Amazing. AstonMartinHeritageFestival.co.uk for your tickets. Also have a look on that website because there's some cool pictures of Aston Martins racing at Brooklands in period. Very, very good stuff, including the test hill, which amazingly has no trees on it. Now it's in a forest. That's fantastic to see that picture.
Yes, I've walked up the pathway next to that test hill. We've done a recording there. We're going to cover Brooklands' history of Aston Martin in a future podcast. I think I forgot to mention. And we walked up the test hill, and Wayne, that is steep, my friend.
It is.
Now, as you know, you've met me, and I'm a fine figure, athletic build, but I was knackered at the top, I'll tell you. So good luck to these cars doing that.
It's worth the walk, though, because if you continue on past the summit of the test hill, you get to a bridge which takes you over the original 1907 banking at Brooklands. And on its first ever motor race in 1907, when it was opened, it attracted 10,000 people to that circuit, and of course it was to become the home and the birthplace of British motorsport and aviation. They made all sorts of amazing aeroplanes there as well, like the Wellington Bomber, and you can look around the museum there. So it's going to be a fantastic day out for you, Aston Martin fans. Get your tickets, and of course don't forget you can get in touch with us here as ever on the podcast, because I mean, Gary and I, we sit here, we think we know what we're doing. We haven't got a clue, really. We want to hear from you.
No.
You need to tell us what you want to hear, basically, because we need your help. So get in touch, AstonMartinHeritagePodcast.com. Click the contact button on there. Send us your message. Send us your stories. Let us know if you know anyone who could share a story with us. And you never know, we might be covering them here on the podcast. It's all about the stories, Gary.
It certainly is. Please don't be shy. Please do get in contact. We need your input. We need your ideas. We need your enthusiasm. Even if you don't want to appear on the podcast, just say, hey, Gary, hey, Wayne, what about this as an idea? Someone came up to me recently and said it would be great to have something on Nimrod. And I think, Wayne, I think that could be a good idea. So even if you have just one or two ideas, do let us know, and we'll try and get those together.
I think the only way we could really do the Nimrod story justice, though, is if we did record that live from Le Mans in France. So I think we're going to have to organise that. But Gary, I can't talk anymore. I've got to go because I hear the tickets for the Aston Martin Heritage Festival are selling out fast now that we've mentioned them. So I've got to get on there and get mine booked. So from me, Wayne Scott, see you later.
And from me, Garry Taylor, see you next time.
The Aston Martin Heritage Podcast. Subscribe and get new episodes delivered to your device automatically via AstonMartinHeritagePodcast.com.